In the vast expanse of the Galactic Consortium, where 1 trillion species have found their place among the stars, there exists
Keep moving.
one
We have to get to the
unbreakable
command
law.
center.
Genetic
Understood.
perfection
The containment
determines
breach
your
is getting
worth.
worse.
For
Faster, we can't let
8,000
it spread to
years,
the other
this principle
decks.
has maintained peace across 10,000 worlds. The strong protect, the intelligent guide, the empathic heal, and the weak serve. But what happens when someone is born with no detectable abilities? No enhanced strength, no telepathic gifts, no superior intellect, no natural weapons or defenses. What happens when that someone refuses to accept their predetermined fate as a laborer on the galaxy's forgotten worlds? Sarah Chen was humanity's greatest mistake, or so the consortium believed. Born without a single genetic enhancement in a species already considered barely adequate for galactic citizenship, she should have been assigned to waste management on a mining colony and forgotten. Instead, she applied to the Galactic Military Academy, the most prestigious institution in known space. Her application didn't just break protocol, it shattered 8 millennia of carefully maintained social order. Because sometimes, the greatest weapon isn't what you're born with. Sometimes, it's what you choose to become despite what you lack. The galaxy is about to learn why humans are truly dangerous, not because of what makes them strong, but because of what happens when you tell them they can't achieve something. This is the story of how one defective human didn't just change the rules, she broke the entire game. The notification crystal pulsed with the soft blue light that indicated priority correspondence from the Galactic Consortium's central administrative hub. Sarah Chen stared at it from across her cramped apartment on Luna Station, knowing exactly what it contained, but unable to bring herself to activate it. For 3 months, she had waited for this response. For 22 years, she had prepared for this moment. The crystal continued its patient pulsing, each flash reflecting off the metal walls of her tiny living space. Outside her single viewport, Earth rotated slowly below, its blue-green surface marred by the scars of humanity's industrial past. Most humans had long since migrated to the orbital stations and colony worlds, leaving their birth world as little more than a historical monument and mining operation. Sarah finally reached for the crystal, her unenhanced fingers trembling slightly as they made contact with its smooth surface. The holographic interface materialized instantly, projecting the official seal of the Galactic Military Academy, a golden star surrounded by the symbols of 100 different species, all genetically superior to humanity in some measurable way. The automated voice that emerged was crisp, professional, and utterly without warmth. Application review complete. Candidate: Sarah Chen, human, registration number 847, Delta Prime. Genetic classification: unenhanced. Physical capabilities: standard human baseline. Mental capabilities: standard human baseline. Special abilities: none detected. Sarah's heart hammered against her ribs as the voice continued its clinical assessment of her inadequacies. She had known this was coming. Every genetic test, every capability assessment, every evaluation had yielded the same result. She was perfectly, unremarkably normal by human standards, which made her catastrophically inadequate by galactic ones. Based on comprehensive analysis, this application is rejected under Section 12 of the Galactic Education Protocols. Candidates must demonstrate genetic enhancement or superior natural abilities in at least 3 of the following categories: physical strength, mental acuity, telepathic sensitivity, energy manipulation, combat reflexes, or species-specific advantages. Candidate Chen demonstrates proficiency in 0 categories. The hologram flickered, and for a moment Sarah thought the message had ended. Then the image changed, showing the face of Director Vexhai, a Drachmori whose natural telepathic abilities and perfect memory recall had made him one of the most respected educators in the galaxy. His scaled features conveyed what might have been sympathy if Drachmori were capable of such emotions toward genetically inferior species. Miss Chen, Director Vexhai began, his mental voice translating directly into her consciousness through the universal communication protocols. I must commend you on your persistence. In my 4 centuries of service, no candidate has submitted an application with such comprehensive supporting documentation, despite having no qualifying genetic markers. Your tactical analyses of historical battles, your psychological profiles of alien species, and your proposed innovations in multi-species cooperation protocols demonstrate a thorough understanding of military science. Sarah felt a spark of hope, but Vexhai's next words crushed it immediately. However, understanding and capability are entirely different matters. The Galactic Military Academy exists to train the galaxy's genetic elite to protect our civilization from threats that would annihilate entire species. We cannot waste resources on candidates who lack the basic enhancements necessary for survival, regardless of their theoretical knowledge. I suggest you apply to the Civilian Administrative Corps, where your organizational skills might prove adequate." The hologram dissolved, leaving Sarah alone in her apartment with the bitter taste of rejection. She slumped against the wall, staring at the dark crystal that had just delivered the death blow to dreams she had harbored since childhood. Outside her viewport, a massive transport vessel moved across Earth's surface, its cargo holds filled with refined materials destined for the core worlds where the galaxy's enhanced elite lived in luxury, earned through genetic superiority. The apartment's communication system chimed, indicating an incoming call. Sarah considered ignoring it. She wasn't in the mood to explain her failure to anyone, but the caller identification made her hesitate. Dr. Elena Vasquez, the only other unenhanced human to ever receive a formal education from the consortium, was one of the few people who might understand what Sarah was feeling. "Answer call," Sarah said wearily. Dr. Vasquez's image materialized, her dark eyes immediately focusing on Sarah's dejected posture. Despite being in her 60s, Vasquez still carried herself with the dignity that had made her humanity's first and only representative in the Galactic Science Council, though even that position was largely ceremonial. "They rejected the application," Vasquez said without preamble. "It wasn't a question." Sarah nodded, unable to trust her voice. Vasquez had been her mentor throughout the application process, helping her navigate the labyrinthine bureaucracy of galactic education protocols. If anyone had believed in the possibility of success, it was the woman who had spent decades proving that unenhanced humans could contribute to galactic society in meaningful ways. "Sarah, listen to me carefully," Vasquez said, leaning closer to her recording device. "This rejection isn't the end. It's the beginning of something much more important. You've forced them to acknowledge that their system has a flaw." "A flaw?" Sarah laughed bitterly. "Elena, they didn't just reject me. They rejected the very concept that someone like me could exist in their world. I'm not genetically enhanced. I don't have natural telepathy. I can't manipulate energy or lift 3 times my body weight or see in 12 different light spectrums. By their standards, I'm barely qualified to clean their facilities." Vasquez's expression grew intense. "That's exactly why this matters. For 8,000 years, the consortium has maintained peace through genetic hierarchy. The strong lead, the intelligent guide, the empathic mediate, and the weak serve. It's a system that works because everyone accepts their place based on abilities they cannot change." Sarah frowned, not understanding where her mentor was heading. And you've just challenged the fundamental assumption that genetic enhancement equals capability. Your application included tactical solutions that their enhanced candidates never considered, psychological insights that their telepaths missed, and strategic innovations that their intellectually superior species overlooked. You've proven that enhancement and ability aren't the same thing. The older woman paused, her expression growing troubled. "But that proof is dangerous, Sarah. If the consortium acknowledges that genetic hierarchy isn't absolute, their entire social structure becomes questionable. Peace has been maintained for millennia because everyone believes their place is determined by biology, not choice." Sarah felt a chill that had nothing to do with the station's climate controls. "You're saying my application is seen as a threat to galactic stability?" "I'm saying your application has been forwarded to the Consortium Security Council for evaluation as a potential disruption to established order. 3 different species have formally requested that humanity implement genetic screening to prevent future applications from unenhanced individuals." The apartment suddenly felt suffocatingly small. Sarah moved to the viewport, staring down at Earth while processing the implications of what Vasquez had just told her. Her simple desire to receive a military education had somehow escalated into a galactic incident. "There's something else," Vasquez continued quietly. "I've been monitoring consortium communication channels. There are rumors that your application has sparked debates on at least 40 different worlds. Enhanced individuals are beginning to question why genetic superiority should automatically guarantee social position. Some are even suggesting that capabilities should be evaluated through performance rather than inherited traits." Sarah turned back to face the hologram. "That sounds like a good thing. It would be, under normal circumstances. But the galaxy's current peace depends on the certainty that everyone has accepted their genetic destiny. If that certainty disappears, we could see social upheaval on a scale not witnessed since the foundation of the consortium. Entire species might revolt against their assigned roles." The weight of unintended consequences pressed down on Sarah's shoulders. She had never intended to threaten galactic stability. She had simply wanted to prove that humanity, that she herself, could contribute to something greater than waste management, and resource extraction. Elena, what am I supposed to do with this information? Hide for the rest of my life? Pretend I never had any ambitions beyond accepting humanity's place as the galaxy's custodial staff? Vasquez's expression shifted, revealing something Sarah had never seen before, a fierce determination that seemed to burn behind her mentor's calm exterior.
No, Sarah.
You're going to do something much more dangerous. You're going to prove them wrong. Before Sarah could ask what that meant, Vasquez leaned forward conspiratorially. I've been in contact with certain individuals throughout the consortium who share our concerns about genetic determinism. There are enhanced beings from dozens of species who believe the current system is fundamentally flawed, regardless of its stability. They've been working toward gradual reform for decades, but your application has accelerated their timeline considerably. Sarah felt her pulse quicken. What kind of individuals? Military officers who've seen genetic superiority fail in combat situations. Scientists who've observed that innovation often comes from unexpected sources. Administrators who've noticed that the most effective solutions frequently emerge from collaborative efforts between multiple species, regardless of their genetic rankings. Vasquez paused significantly. And a few high-ranking officials who believe the consortium's greatest strength lies not in maintaining genetic hierarchy, but in maximizing the potential contributions of all member species. The implications were staggering. They're talking about a conspiracy against the fundamental structure of galactic society. I'm talking about evolution, Sarah. Systems that cannot adapt to new information are destined for collapse. Your application has provided new information that challenges 8 millennia of assumptions. The question now is whether the consortium will adapt or attempt to suppress that information. Sarah moved away from the viewport, her mind racing through possibilities and consequences. And if they choose suppression? Vasquez's smile was grim. Then you become the catalyst for changes that will reshape the galaxy, whether the established powers want them or not. Because there's one thing that genetically enhanced have never had to develop, Sarah. They've never had to learn how to succeed despite being told they're inadequate. They've never had to innovate solutions when brute force or inherited abilities aren't sufficient. The older woman leaned back, her expression growing thoughtful. Humans may be the galaxy's genetic underclass, but we're also the only species that has spent its entire evolutionary history overcoming limitations through adaptation, cooperation, and sheer stubborn refusal to accept defeat. That might be the most dangerous enhancement of all. Sarah stared at the now silent communication crystal, its blue light no longer pulsing. Her rejection from the Galactic Military Academy had seemed like the end of her dreams, but Vasquez's words suggested it might be the beginning of something far more significant and terrifying. Outside her viewport, Earth continued its ancient rotation, unchanged by the conversation that had just occurred in a tiny apartment on Luna Station. But Sarah Chen was no longer the same person who had opened that rejection message. She was still unenhanced, still genetically unremarkable by consortium standards. But for the first time in her life, she was beginning to understand that being born wrong might be exactly what the galaxy needed. The summons arrived exactly 72 hours after Sarah's conversation with Dr. Vasquez. Unlike the casual blue pulse of her rejection notice, this communication crystal blazed with the urgent red gold of consortium security protocols. Sarah had never seen such a signal in person, though every citizen knew its meaning. Immediate compliance was not optional. She activated the crystal with trembling fingers, half expecting to see arrest warrants or deportation orders. Instead, the hologram displayed the official seal of Director Voxhai, followed by a message that made her question whether she had somehow fallen into an alternate reality. Miss Chen, the recorded Vexai began, his mental voice carrying undertones of what might have been amusement. Circumstances regarding your application have evolved considerably. You are hereby invited to present yourself at the Galactic Military Academy within 14 standard days for supplemental evaluation. Transport has been arranged. The message dissolved before Sarah could process its implications fully. Supplemental evaluation? After they had explicitly rejected her application for lacking any qualifying genetic markers? The invitation made no sense within the framework of consortium educational protocols. Her confusion deepened when she noticed a second crystal pulsing beside the first, this one bearing the personal seal of Commander Zektor, a legendary Haxani warrior whose tactical brilliance had prevented 3 separate galactic conflicts. Sarah activated it with growing bewilderment. Human Sarah Chen. The commander's gravelly voice rumbled through the translation matrix. His forearms crossed in what Sarah recognized as a gesture of respect among his species. I have reviewed your tactical analyses with considerable interest. Your solutions to the vegan crisis scenario demonstrated innovative thinking that our enhanced strategists failed to achieve. I have personally requested your presence at the Academy for direct consultation on several classified matters. Sarah sank into her apartment's single chair, staring at the now dark crystals. Commander Zektor was requesting her consultation on classified military matters. The same Commander Zektor whose name was legendary throughout the galaxy, who had led the alliance that defeated the Void Hunters 50 years ago. Her personal communication system chimed insistently. Dr. Vasquez appeared immediately upon connection, her expression mixing excitement with deep concern. Sarah, I need you to listen very carefully to what I'm about to tell you, Vasquez began without preamble. Your rejection from the Academy has triggered a chain reaction throughout the consortium that no one anticipated. High Command is divided into factions that are approaching open conflict over the implications of your application. Sarah gestured toward the message crystals. I just received invitations from Director Vexai and Commander Zektor. How is that possible if my application was officially rejected? Vasquez's expression grew troubled. Because your rejection has exposed fundamental fractures in the consortium's command structure, there are now 3 distinct factions competing for control over how to handle your case. And each faction represents a different vision for the galaxy's future. The older woman activated a privacy screen that would prevent their conversation from being monitored, then continued in lowered tones. The first faction, led by the Genetic Purity Council, wants your application classified as a security threat and humanity restricted to non-essential roles until we implement mandatory enhancement protocols. They see any challenge to genetic hierarchy as existential danger to galactic stability. Sarah felt cold dread settling in her stomach. And the second faction? Moderate reformists, including Director Vexai. They believe your application represents an opportunity for gradual evolution of consortium policies without threatening fundamental stability. They want to study you as a case example while maintaining current hierarchical structures with minor modifications. That sounds almost reasonable, Sarah said cautiously. Vasquez's expression darkened. The third faction is the most dangerous. Revolutionary elements led by Commander Zektor and several other high-ranking military officers. They see your application as proof that the entire genetic hierarchy system is flawed and needs complete restructuring. They want to use you as a symbol for overthrowing 8 millennia of established order. Sarah stared at her mentor in growing horror. Elena, I never wanted any of this. I just wanted to attend the academy and serve in the military. I never intended to become the center of a political crisis. I know, but intention is irrelevant now. Your mere existence as an unenhanced human seeking advancement has become a catalyst for conflicts that were already brewing beneath the surface. The consortium has maintained peace for so long that most species have forgotten how fragile that peace actually is. Vasquez leaned closer to her recording device. Sarah, each faction is now maneuvering to control your response to these invitations. The Genetic Purity Council wants you to decline and disappear into administrative work. The reformists want you to accept and participate in their controlled study. The revolutionaries want you to attend and provide them with justification for system-wide changes. And what do you want me to do? Sarah asked. I want you to understand that whatever choice you make will have consequences extending far beyond your personal ambitions. If you decline these invitations, you validate the Purity Council's position that unenhanced beings should know their place. If you accept and cooperate with the reformists, you become a symbol for gradual change that might take centuries to implement. If you align with the revolutionaries, you risk triggering the first galactic civil war in 8,000 years. Sarah moved to her viewport again, staring down at Earth while considering the impossible weight of decision before her. Below, she could see the lights of the few remaining surface cities, small points of illumination on a world that had once held 20 billion humans. Now, most of humanity lived on stations and colony worlds, performing the unglamorous but necessary tasks that kept galactic civilization functioning. There's a fourth option, Sarah said quietly. Vasquez frowned. What do you mean? Sarah turned back to face her mentor, feeling a strange calm settling over her thoughts. I go to the academy and ignore all 3 factions. I attend their evaluations, participate in their programs, and demonstrate capabilities through performance rather than politics. I let my actions speak louder than anyone's ideology. Sarah, that's incredibly naive. You can't remain neutral when 3 major political forces are competing to use you as a symbol for their causes. Maybe not, Sarah agreed. But I can refuse to be a symbol at all. I can simply be a person trying to prove that capability matters more than genetics, without representing any broader political movement. Vasquez's expression grew skeptical. Do you really believe the various factions will allow you to remain apolitical? The moment you demonstrate any significant capability, each group will claim you as validation of their position. Sarah considered this, then shrugged. Let them claim whatever they want. My job isn't to validate anyone's political theory. My job is to succeed despite everyone's expectations of failure. And if your success triggers the galactic civil war that Commander Zektor's faction seems eager to provoke, Sarah met her mentor's gaze steadily. Then maybe the consortium's peace was never as stable as everyone believed. Maybe a system that depends on suppressing individual potential in favor of genetic determinism was always destined for eventual collapse. Vasquez fell silent, studying Sarah's face with the intensity of someone trying to solve a complex equation. Finally, she spoke with reluctant admiration. You're going to accept both invitations, aren't you? I'm going to accept the opportunity to prove that humans can contribute to galactic civilization in ways that extend beyond waste management and resource extraction. If that threatens the established order, then perhaps the established order needs to be threatened. Sarah, you're talking about walking into a situation where every action you take will be analyzed by political factions looking for justification for their positions. The pressure will be enormous. Sarah smiled for the first time since receiving her rejection notice. Elena, I've spent my entire life being told that I'm inadequate by galactic standards. I've been evaluated, tested, and measured against genetic markers I could never possess. Everyone expects me to fail because I lack enhancements that other species take for granted. If I can't handle political pressure after dealing with a lifetime of systematic dismissal, then maybe I really don't belong at the Academy. Vasquez's expression shifted to something approaching pride. You realize that once you accept these invitations, there's no returning to anonymity? Regardless of how you perform, your actions will be scrutinized by every major political force in the galaxy. Good, Sarah said with unexpected firmness. Let them scrutinize. Let them analyze every decision I make and every capability I demonstrate. Because for the first time in galactic history, they'll be evaluating an unenhanced human not as a curiosity or security threat, but as an individual whose performance might actually matter. Sarah moved to her personal console and began composing response messages to both Director Vexai and Commander Zektor. The words came easily, stripped of political implications and focused on simple acceptance of their invitations. To Director Vexai, I accept your invitation for supplemental evaluation at the Galactic Military Academy. I look forward to demonstrating that capability extends beyond genetic enhancement. To Commander Zektor, I am honored by your request for consultation and accept your invitation to attend the Academy. I hope to provide useful perspectives on the strategic challenges you have mentioned. As she prepared to transmit the messages, Vasquez spoke one final warning. Sarah, once these responses are sent, you become the most closely watched individual in the galaxy. Every faction will be looking for evidence to support their interpretation of what your presence at the Academy represents. Are you prepared for that level of scrutiny? Sarah activated the transmission protocols, watching as her responses dissolved into quantum particles that would reach their destinations within hours. The decision was made, irreversibly committed to the Galactic Communication Network. I've been scrutinized my entire life, Elena. The only difference now is that the scrutiny might actually lead to something meaningful instead of another assignment to sanitation duties on a mining world. After Vasquez ended the connection, Sarah found herself alone with the magnitude of what she had just committed to. In 2 weeks, she would travel to the Galactic Military Academy, not as an accepted cadet but as something unprecedented, an unenhanced human whose presence would be interpreted as validation or threat by the galaxy's most powerful political factions. Outside her viewport, Earth continued its rotation, indifferent to the forces her simple application had set in motion. But Sarah Chen was no longer the person who had submitted that application months ago. She was no longer someone seeking acceptance into an established system. She was becoming something far more dangerous. An unenhanced human who refused to accept that genetics determined destiny. Whether that transformation would lead to gradual reform, revolutionary change, or galactic catastrophe remained to be seen. But for the first time in her life, Sarah Chen was looking forward to finding out. The transport vessel's stellar convergence was a masterpiece of consortium engineering. Its quantum fold drives capable of traversing the galaxy in mere days rather than the centuries required by primitive, faster-than-light technology. Sarah had never imagined she would travel aboard such a ship, much less as an invited guest rather than assigned cargo. Her cabin was modest but comfortable, designed for species with humanoid physiology. The walls displayed rotating holographic views of the space outside, currently showing the twisted reality of quantum fold transit, where normal physics bent into impossible geometries. Sarah found the view simultaneously fascinating and nauseating. Another reminder that she lacked the enhanced equilibrium systems that allowed other species to navigate such journeys without discomfort. A soft chime announced an incoming communication. Sarah expected another message from Dr. Vasquez or perhaps updated instructions from the Academy. Instead, she found herself facing the distinctive features of Admiral Thoss, the Kytherian commander of the consortium fleet. His crystalline carapace reflected the cabin's lighting in patterns that conveyed formal respect according to his species' nonverbal communication protocols. "Human Sarah Chen," Admiral Thoss began, his translated voice carrying undertones of genuine curiosity, "I trust your journey proceeds comfortably. I am contacting you because your upcoming evaluation has generated considerable discussion within Fleet Command, and I believe you should understand the broader context before your arrival." Sarah straightened in her chair, recognizing the significance of receiving direct communication from one of the galaxy's highest-ranking military officers.
"I appreciate your concern, Admiral, but I was under the impression that my evaluation would be conducted by Academy personnel."
"Miss Chen, your presence at the Academy has transcended simple educational evaluation. The political implications of your application have reached the highest levels of consortium governance. 3 separate species have threatened to withdraw from the Alliance if your case is not handled according to their preferences." Sarah felt the familiar weight of unintended consequences pressing down on her shoulders. "Admiral, I never intended for my application to create political instability. I simply wanted to receive military training and serve the consortium in whatever capacity my abilities allowed." "Your intentions are irrelevant to the current situation," Thoss replied, though his tone remained respectful. "What matters is that your application has forced the consortium to confront fundamental assumptions about genetic hierarchy that have remained unquestioned for millennia. The various factions are now positioning themselves to use your evaluation results as justification for their competing visions of galactic governance." The Admiral's image shifted as he leaned forward, his crystalline features reflecting complex patterns of light. "I am contacting you because I believe you deserve to understand exactly what will be expected of you during the evaluation process. This is not a simple assessment of your academic knowledge or military aptitude. You will be tested in ways designed to either validate or refute the genetic hierarchy system itself." Sarah felt a chill of apprehension. "What kind of tests?" "Combat simulations against genetically enhanced opponents. Strategic analysis of scenarios specifically chosen to highlight the advantages of enhanced intelligence. Leadership exercises with teams composed of species whose natural abilities far exceed human baseline capabilities. Physical challenges designed to demonstrate the limitations of unenhanced physiology." Thoss paused, allowing Sarah to absorb the implications. "The Academy faculty has been instructed to create evaluation protocols that will definitively prove whether genetic enhancement is necessary for military effectiveness. Depending on your performance, the results will be used to either reinforce current hierarchical policies or justify their modification." "And if I fail these tests?" Sarah asked, though she already suspected the answer. "If you fail, the Genetic Purity Council will use those results to implement restrictions on unenhanced species throughout the consortium. Humans and similar baseline populations will be formally relegated to support roles with no possibility of advancement. Your species' current limited autonomy will be revoked in favor of direct oversight by enhanced administrators." Sarah stared at the Admiral's image, processing the magnitude of what he had just revealed. Her personal failure would result in the systematic oppression of humanity and potentially other unenhanced species throughout the galaxy. "And if I succeed?" Thoss's carapace shifted colors and patterns that conveyed deep uncertainty. "If you succeed, particularly if you excel beyond reasonable expectations, the revolutionary faction will use those results to challenge the legitimacy of the entire genetic hierarchy system. They will argue that if an unenhanced human can match or exceed the performance of genetically superior beings, then the fundamental premise of consortium governance is flawed." The Admiral's image flickered slightly as the ship's communication systems adjusted to quantum fold interference. "Miss Chen, I must ask you directly, do you fully comprehend that your evaluation performance will influence the governance structure of the galaxy itself?" Sarah stood and moved to the viewport, staring out at the impossible geometry of folded space while considering her response. The weight of responsibility was crushing, but beneath the fear, she felt something else stirring. A fierce determination that had sustained humanity through millennia of struggle. "Admiral, may I ask you a personal question?" Thoss made a gesture of permission. "In your military experience, have you ever encountered situations where genetic enhancement failed to provide expected advantages? Where unenhanced beings contributed capabilities that enhanced individuals lacked?" The Admiral's carapace shifted through a complex sequence of colors before he responded. Your question is perceptive, Miss Chen. Yes, I have observed such situations. Enhanced beings occasionally suffer from overconfidence in their abilities, leading to strategic errors that more cautious, unenhanced individuals might avoid. Additionally, the certainty of genetic hierarchy sometimes prevents enhanced leaders from considering innovative solutions that challenge established protocols. Then you believe there might be validity to the revolutionary faction's position? Thos was silent for several moments, his crystalline features reflecting rapidly shifting patterns of light. Finally, he spoke with careful precision. I believe that any system incapable of adaptation is ultimately doomed to failure. The consortium has maintained stability for 8 millennia precisely because it has been willing to evolve its policies when presented with new information. Your application represents new information that challenges our fundamental assumptions. The Admiral leaned back, his formal demeanor returning. However, I also believe that revolutionary change implemented too rapidly can destroy the very civilization it seeks to improve. The challenge before you, Miss Chen, is to demonstrate your capabilities in ways that promote adaptation rather than destruction. Sarah turned back to face the Admiral's image. You want me to succeed, but not too dramatically. Prove that unenhanced beings can contribute without threatening the stability that genetic hierarchy provides. I want you to perform to the best of your abilities and allow the results to speak for themselves, regardless of political implications. But I also want you to understand that your actions will be interpreted through the lens of competing ideologies, each seeking validation for their vision of the galaxy's future. Thos made a gesture that conveyed formal respect. Miss Chen, you possess something that many enhanced beings have never had to develop. The ability to succeed despite being told you are inadequate. That capability may prove more valuable than any genetic enhancement, particularly in situations where brute force or inherited advantages are insufficient. Sarah felt a spark of the confidence that had sustained her through years of systematic dismissal. Admiral, I appreciate your warning about the political implications of my evaluation, but I need you to understand something about humans in general and about me specifically. Please continue. We've spent our entire evolutionary history being told we were inadequate by our environment, our predators, and our own limitations. Every advancement in human civilization came from refusing to accept that inadequacy as permanent. We learned to use tools because we lacked natural weapons. We developed cooperation because we were individually weak. We created technology because we couldn't naturally manipulate energy or matter. Sarah moved closer to the communication terminal, her expression growing intense. I didn't apply to the Galactic Military Academy to prove a political point or to challenge genetic hierarchy. I applied because I believe I can contribute to something greater than myself. If that contribution happens to have political implications, then those are consequences I'm willing to accept. Admiral Thos studied her face through the holographic projection, his carapace shifting through patterns that conveyed what might have been approval. Miss Chen, I believe you may be exactly what the consortium needs, regardless of which political faction ultimately claims victory. The galaxy has been stable for so long that we have forgotten the value of individuals who refuse to accept predetermined limitations. The communication link began to deteriorate as the ship prepared to exit quantum fold transit. Your transport will arrive at Academy Station within 6 hours, Thos continued through increasing static. I wish you success in whatever form that success may take. The Admiral's image dissolved, leaving Sarah alone with her thoughts as the ship emerged from folded space into normal reality. Through her viewport, she could see Academy Station growing larger against the backdrop of stars, a massive installation that housed the most prestigious educational facility in the galaxy. The station was beautiful in its complexity, with sections designed to accommodate every known species' environmental requirements. Gravitational fields varied by deck level, atmospheric compositions changed by quadrant, and temperature zones accommodated everything from Arctic-adapted polarans to the plasma-based stellari. It was a monument to galactic cooperation and diversity, maintained through strict genetic hierarchy that ensured everyone knew their place. Sarah pressed her palm against the viewport, watching as transport vessels from dozens of worlds converged on the station. Each ship carried cadets whose genetic enhancements guaranteed their acceptance into the Academy's programs. They came from species with natural telepathy, enhanced strength, superior intellect, or specialized abilities that made them valuable to galactic military service. And somewhere among those ships, traveling in luxury that reflected their genetic superiority, were the beings she would soon be evaluated against. Enhanced individuals who had never experienced systematic dismissal, never been told they were inadequate, never had to develop the stubborn determination that came from refusing to accept genetic destiny. As the stellar convergence approached the Academy's docking facilities, Sarah felt a calm certainty settling over her thoughts. She was still unenhanced, still genetically unremarkable by consortium standards. But she was no longer the person who had submitted that first application months ago. She was something new, an unenhanced human, who understood that her evaluation would influence the fate of entire civilizations, and who was looking forward to the challenge anyway. Whether that made her incredibly brave or incredibly foolish remained to be seen. But Sarah Chen was eager to find out which one it would be. Academy Station's docking bay hummed with activity, as beings from across the galaxy moved through customs and security protocols. Sarah stood in line behind a group of Vorthak cadets, whose enhanced musculature and natural armor plating made them appear like walking tanks. Ahead of them, a cluster of Mentari exchanged complex telepathic communications that required no spoken words. The diversity was overwhelming, and Sarah felt acutely aware of how ordinary she appeared among these genetically superior beings. The custom scanner analyzed her biological signature with typical consortium efficiency. Species, human. Enhancement status, none detected. Clearance level, special administrative. Proceed to Section 7 for orientation briefing. Sarah followed the directional indicators through corridors designed to accommodate vastly different physicians. Some sections featured gravitational fields strong enough to crush unenhanced humans, while others maintained atmospheric compositions that would be toxic to most carbon-based life forms. The Academy truly was a marvel of multi-species engineering, even if its underlying purpose was to train the galaxy's genetic elite to maintain their dominance. Section 7 turned out to be a small amphitheater filled with what Sarah initially assumed were other unenhanced species. Closer examination revealed that while most appeared physically ordinary, each displayed subtle indicators of genetic modification. The slightly enlarged craniums of intellectually enhanced Terrians, the perfectly symmetrical features that indicated aesthetic optimization among the Butari, the controlled grace that suggested enhanced reflexes in several humanoid species. Sarah was the only completely unenhanced being in the room. Director Vexai materialized at the chamber's center through the holographic projection system, his Drakmori features conveying formal authority. Welcome, candidates, to what may be the most significant evaluation in consortium history. You represent various approaches to genetic optimization, and your performance during the coming trials will inform policy decisions that affect billions of beings across the galaxy. The director's mental voice carried undertones of anticipation mixed with concern. Each of you has been selected because your capabilities challenge traditional assumptions about the relationship between genetic enhancement and practical performance. Some possess minimal modifications, others represent innovative approaches to optimization, and one among you carries no enhancements whatsoever. Sarah felt every eye in the amphitheater turned toward her, examining the unenhanced human who had somehow earned a place among the galaxy's most carefully selected candidates. She maintained steady composure despite the weight of scrutiny, drawing on years of experience with being dismissed and underestimated. The evaluation protocols have been designed by committees representing every major faction within consortium governance, Vexai continued. You will face challenges in combat simulation, strategic analysis, leadership assessment, and adaptive problem solving. Your performance will be analyzed not merely for individual capability, but for what it reveals about the optimal relationship between genetic enhancement and military effectiveness. A Mentari cadet raised her hand, her telepathic query translating into audible speech through the communication matrix. Director, are we being evaluated as individuals or as representatives of our respective enhancement philosophies? Vexai's expression conveyed what might have been sympathy in his species. Both, candidate Zareth. Your individual performance matters, but the broader implications of your collective results will influence governance policies for generations. The pressure you feel is legitimate and significant. Sarah remained silent, but internally she was analyzing the political dynamics at play. Each candidate represented a different approach to genetic optimization, from subtle intellectual enhancements to dramatic physical modifications. Their evaluation results would be used to determine whether minimal enhancement could match optimal performance, whether specific modifications provided measurable advantages, and whether enhancement was necessary at all for military effectiveness. Your first assessment begins immediately, Vexai announced. Combat simulation against opponents selected to challenge your particular capabilities. Candidate Chen, you will face 3 enhanced opponents in sequential engagement. Your tactical analysis suggested that unenhanced humans could overcome genetic advantages through superior strategy and adaptation. This hypothesis will now be tested. The amphitheater dissolved around Sarah, replaced by the stark environment of a combat simulation chamber. The holographic terrain resembled an urban battleground with multiple levels, cover positions, and environmental hazards. It was exactly the kind of complex environment where brute force would be less effective than tactical thinking. Her first opponent materialized across the simulated street, a Haxani warrior whose forearms and natural armor plating made him a formidable close combat specialist. Sarah had studied Haxani fighting techniques extensively, knowing that their enhanced physiology gave them overwhelming advantages in direct confrontation. The simulation began without warning. The Haxani charged forward with devastating speed, his multiple limbs allowing for complex attack patterns that would overwhelm most opponents. Sarah immediately activated the urban environment's defensive possibilities, using debris and architectural features to slow his advance while maintaining distance. What followed was not a fight in any traditional sense. Sarah refused to engage in direct combat, instead using the environment itself as a weapon. She triggered controlled building collapses that forced her opponent to redirect his attacks toward debris removal. She manipulated the simulation's environmental hazards to create obstacles that negated his natural armor advantages. She used vertical terrain to exploit the Haxani tendency toward ground-based combat patterns. 23 minutes later, her opponent was trapped beneath rubble that would require hours to clear, while Sarah maintained tactical superiority from an elevated position with clear escape routes. The simulation ended with her victory achieved through environmental manipulation rather than direct combat. "Impressive adaptation," came a voice from the observation area. Commander Zektor had been monitoring the engagement personally. "You avoided playing to your opponent's strengths while maximizing your environmental advantages. Classic asymmetric warfare principles." Sarah's second opponent was a stellary energy manipulator, whose plasma-based attacks could incinerate most biological matter within seconds. This time, the environment shifted to a crystalline cavern system where energy discharges would create unpredictable ricochet patterns. Again, Sarah refused direct engagement. She used the cavern's reflective properties to turn her opponent's greatest strength into a liability, creating situations where the Stellari's energy attacks rebounded in ways that threatened his own position. The crystalline formations amplified and redirected plasma discharges, turning the environment into a maze of potential self-destruction. The Stellari's defeat came when his increasingly frustrated attacks created a cascade resonance that shattered his position's structural integrity, leaving him isolated without tactical mobility, while Sarah maintained control over multiple exit routes and defensive positions. Her third opponent proved most challenging, a Mentari telepath whose enhanced cognitive abilities allowed her to predict Sarah's tactical decisions before they were fully formed. The battlefield this time was a complex space station with multiple gravitational orientations and atmospheric zones. Against the telepathic opponent, Sarah was forced to develop entirely new tactical approaches. She began implementing deliberately irrational strategies that violated conventional military logic, making decisions that appeared counterproductive until their true purpose became clear. She used the station's gravitational variations to create three-dimensional combat patterns that confused telepathic prediction, since most telepaths relied on conventional thought processes to anticipate opponent behavior. The engagement lasted 47 minutes and ended with Sarah's victory through exhaustion tactics. By maintaining constant unpredictability and refusing to follow logical strategic patterns, she forced her telepathic opponent to expend mental energy on analyzing increasingly chaotic data until cognitive overload made effective prediction impossible. When the simulation chamber returned to normal configuration, Sarah found herself facing a room full of observers whose expressions ranged from amazement to deep concern. Director Vexai was studying readouts from the combat analysis with what appeared to be fascination mixed with alarm. "Candidate Chen," Commander Zektor said slowly, "your tactical approaches violated virtually every principle of enhanced combat doctrine. You refused to engage opponents directly, you exploited environmental factors that enhanced beings typically ignore, and you implemented strategies that appear inefficient until their cumulative effects become apparent." Sarah nodded, still catching her breath from the extended simulations. "Commander, enhanced beings are trained to maximize their genetic advantages through direct application of superior abilities. That approach works when facing similar opponents, but it creates predictable patterns that can be exploited by someone willing to think unconventionally. You're suggesting that genetic enhancement creates tactical limitations?" This came from Admiral Thoss, who had apparently arrived during the combat simulations. "I'm suggesting that being told you're superior from birth might make you less likely to develop adaptive strategies for dealing with unexpected challenges," Sarah replied carefully. Enhanced beings know they possess advantages, so they naturally try to utilize those advantages directly. Unenhanced beings know they lack advantages, so we learn to create them through unconventional means. A Drakmori observer stepped forward, his scaled features conveying skeptical interest. Candidate Chen, your performance was remarkable, but these were controlled simulations against isolated opponents. Real combat situations involve multiple enemies, limited resources, and unpredictable variables that favor enhanced capabilities. Sarah met his gaze steadily. Respectfully, sir, my entire life has involved dealing with multiple opponents, limited resources, and unpredictable variables that favor enhanced capabilities. The difference is that I've been developing adaptive strategies for that environment since childhood, while enhanced beings typically encounter such challenges for the first time during crisis situations. The room fell silent as the implications of her statement settled over the assembled observers. Sarah had just articulated what many had begun to suspect, that genetic enhancement, while providing obvious advantages, might also create dependencies that became liabilities when those advantages proved insufficient. Director Vekshay activated his recording system, documenting her responses for later analysis. Candidate Chen, your combat performance will be analyzed extensively by tactical specialists from multiple species. However, combat simulation represents only the first phase of your evaluation. Tomorrow, you will face strategic analysis challenges designed to test cognitive capabilities against enhanced intellects. Sarah nodded acknowledgement, though internally she was analyzing the political implications of what had just occurred. Her victories against 3 enhanced opponents had been achieved through methods that challenged fundamental assumptions about genetic superiority. The observer's reaction suggested that her performance had exceeded even the revolutionary faction's expectations. As the evaluation session concluded and the assembled candidates were directed toward their quarters, Sarah found herself wondering whether her success was proving exactly the wrong point. She had wanted to demonstrate that unenhanced beings could contribute to galactic military service. Instead, she might be providing evidence that genetic enhancement created exploitable weaknesses in enhanced beings. Walking through Academy Station's corridors toward her assigned quarters, Sarah passed groups of enhanced cadets whose confidence seemed slightly shaken by what they had witnessed. Word of the evaluation results was clearly spreading throughout the Academy community, generating discussions about genetic hierarchy that had never occurred before. In her quarters that night, Sarah stared out at the stars visible through her viewport and wondered whether she was advancing human dignity or threatening galactic stability. Her combat victories had been decisive, but they raised questions about the fundamental premises of consortium civilization that might prove more dangerous than her original application had ever been. Tomorrow would bring cognitive challenges against the galaxy's most intellectually enhanced beings. Sarah had no enhanced mental capabilities, no telepathic advantages, no genetic modifications that improved processing speed or analytical capacity. But she had something that enhanced beings might lack: 20 years of being told she was inadequate and refusing to accept that assessment as permanent truth. Whether that would prove sufficient against opponents whose intelligence exceeded human baseline by orders of magnitude remained to be seen. Sarah Chen was looking forward to finding out. The strategic analysis chamber was unlike anything Sarah had ever seen. Holographic displays surrounded her position, showing real-time data from thousands of star systems, fleet movements spanning galactic regions, and economic indicators that influenced the stability of entire civilizations. This wasn't a simulation. It was the actual consortium's strategic command interface, normally accessible only to the highest levels of military leadership. Director Vekshay materialized beside her, his expression conveying the gravity of what was about to unfold. Candidate Chen, your final evaluation will involve analyzing actual strategic challenges currently facing the consortium. Your recommendations will be compared against solutions developed by our most enhanced strategic minds and, if deemed viable, potentially implemented by High Command. Sarah felt a moment of vertigo as the implications hit her. Director, you're asking me to provide strategic guidance on real military situations that affect billions of beings? The consortium faces genuine threats that our enhanced strategists have been unable to resolve effectively. Your unconventional thinking demonstrated during combat simulations suggests you might identify solutions that traditional approaches have missed. This evaluation will determine whether unit-enhanced perspectives offer genuine value or merely alternative approaches that lead to the same conclusions. The holographic displays shifted to focus on a specific stellar region where Sarah could see massive fleet concentrations from multiple species. The tactical situation was immediately recognizable as a potential flashpoint that could escalate into galactic conflict. The Sigma Draconis crisis. Vexai explained. 3 separate species claimed territorial rights to a system containing rare quantum crystals essential for advanced technology production. Enhanced strategists have proposed 7 different solutions, all of which require military intervention and result in at least one species' territorial ambitions being permanently frustrated. Each proposed solution carries significant risk of escalating into broader conflict. Sarah studied the data streams, analyzing not just the immediate tactical situation, but the historical, economic, and political factors that had created the crisis. Enhanced strategists would focus on optimal resource allocation, military force deployment, and diplomatic leverage based on genetic hierarchies that determined which species deserved priority consideration. But Sarah found herself looking at entirely different patterns. Director, may I access historical data on similar territorial disputes and their long-term outcomes? Certainly. Additional displays materialized around her, showing centuries of conflict resolution data. Wow. Sarah spent 3 hours analyzing the information, ignoring the growing crowd of observers that included Admiral Thoss, Commander Zektor, and representatives from the major political factions. When she finally spoke, her voice carried quiet confidence that surprised even her. The enhanced strategic recommendations are all fundamentally flawed because they assume the crisis must be resolved through resource allocation. They're trying to determine which species deserves the quantum crystals based on genetic hierarchy, economic contribution, or military strength. But that approach guarantees long-term instability because it validates the premise that territorial disputes should be settled through demonstrations of superiority. Admiral Thoss leaned forward, his crystalline features reflecting intense interest. What alternative approach do you suggest? Sarah manipulated the holographic displays to show economic projections extending far beyond the immediate crisis. The quantum crystals aren't actually the real issue. Each species needs them for specific technological applications that enhance their existing advantages. But none of them need exclusive control over the entire system to achieve their objectives. She highlighted specific data points within the projections. Joint development and shared access protocols would provide each species with sufficient quantum crystal access while creating economic interdependencies that make future conflicts counterproductive. Instead of determining a winner, we transform the competition into cooperation that benefits everyone. Commander Zektor's forearms crossed in a gesture that conveyed skepticism. Candidate Chen, your proposal requires each species to accept reduced territorial control in exchange for economic cooperation. Enhanced strategic analysis indicates that superior species naturally resist such limitations on their expansion capabilities. Sarah turned to face the commander directly. With respect, sir, enhanced strategic analysis is exactly why this crisis exists in the first place. Superior species resist limitations because genetic hierarchy tells them they deserve unrestricted expansion. But genetic superiority doesn't create quantum crystals, and territorial control doesn't guarantee technological advancement. She gestured toward the economic projections. Joint development would actually increase each species' quantum crystal access beyond what they could achieve through exclusive territorial control, because cooperative extraction and processing methods are more efficient than competitive approaches. They're fighting over control when they should be collaborating for mutual benefit. Director Vexai studied the projected outcomes with growing fascination. Your proposal would require fundamental changes in how territorial disputes are conceptualized. Enhanced beings are conditioned to seek dominance, not partnership. Then maybe that conditioning is part of the problem, Sarah replied quietly. Enhanced beings possess obvious advantages in specific areas, but that doesn't mean they should automatically control everything. Different species have different strengths, and optimal outcomes often result from combining those strengths rather than letting the strongest species dominate. The observation chamber fell silent as Sarah's words hung in the air. She had just challenged the fundamental premise of galactic governance more directly than any previous candidate. Genetic hierarchy assumed that superior beings should control resources and make decisions for inferior species. Sarah was suggesting that superiority in one area didn't automatically confer superiority in all areas. Admiral Thoss activated his recording system, documenting her analysis for transmission to Strategic Command. Candidate Chen, your recommendations will be forwarded to the Crisis Resolution Committee for evaluation. If implemented successfully, your approach would represent the first non-hierarchical solution to a major territorial dispute in consortium history. Sarah nodded, but her attention was already shifting to additional strategic displays that were materializing around the chamber. The Sigma Draconis crisis was apparently just the beginning of her evaluation. The Void Hunter incursion, Vexai announced as new tactical data flooded the displays. Long-range sensors have detected massive energy signatures beyond the galactic rim that match the technological signatures of the entities that nearly destroyed galactic civilization 50 years ago. Enhanced strategic analysis recommends immediate military mobilization and preemptive strikes against suspected Void Hunter staging areas. Sarah studied the sensor data, trying to understand why enhanced strategists would recommend attacking entities whose technology remained largely incomprehensible even after decades of study. The Void Hunters were energy-based beings capable of consuming entire star systems, and previous conflicts had demonstrated that conventional military approaches were largely ineffective against them. Director, the enhanced strategic recommendations assume that military force will be effective against entities that exist in quantum states our technology cannot fully interact with. Previous conflicts succeeded only when we developed entirely new defensive technologies rather than relying on existing military capabilities. She manipulated the displays to show research data from the last Void Hunter conflict. We should be developing quantum state interaction. We should be developing quantum state interaction technologies that allow meaningful engagement with energy-based entities. The Void Hunters aren't necessarily hostile. They consume energy because it's their natural metabolic process. But they might be capable of negotiation if we can establish proper communication protocols. Commander Zektor's expression conveyed profound skepticism. Candidate Chen, you're suggesting diplomatic engagement with entities that have consumed entire civilizations. Enhanced analysis indicates that Void Hunters view other forms of life as irrelevant energy sources rather than potential partners. Sarah met his gaze steadily. Enhanced analysis failed to prevent the last Void Hunter incursion and nearly resulted in galactic extinction. Maybe it's time to try approaches that enhanced beings haven't considered. The chamber erupted in heated discussion as observers debated the implications of Sarah's recommendations. She had just suggested that diplomatic engagement might be more effective than military force against the galaxy's most feared external threat, directly contradicting enhanced strategic doctrine that emphasized strength-based solutions. But Director Vexay's expression conveyed something approaching awe as he studied Sarah's analysis. Candidate Chen, your strategic recommendations consistently challenge fundamental assumptions about genetic hierarchy and superior capability. You suggest cooperative solutions to territorial disputes, diplomatic engagement with seemingly hostile entities, and resource-sharing protocols that prioritize mutual benefit over dominance assertion. Sarah turned to face the assembled observers, recognizing that her evaluation had transcended simple capability assessment. She was articulating an entirely different philosophy of galactic governance, one that challenged 8 millennia of genetic hierarchy. Director, I'm suggesting that genetic enhancement provides specific advantages in particular areas, but those advantages don't automatically make enhanced beings better at everything. Superior strength doesn't guarantee superior strategy. Enhanced intelligence doesn't necessarily produce optimal solutions. Natural telepathy doesn't always provide accurate insight into others' motivations. She gestured toward the strategic displays surrounding them. These challenges exist because enhanced beings keep trying to solve them through applications of their enhanced capabilities. Stronger military force, more sophisticated analysis, better telepathic intelligence gathering. But what if the solutions require approaches that enhanced capabilities actually make more difficult to perceive? Admiral Thaw stood slowly, his crystalline carapace reflecting complex patterns of light that conveyed deep thought. Candidate Chen, you are suggesting that genetic enhancement creates systematic blind spots that prevent enhanced beings from developing certain types of solutions. I'm suggesting that being told you're superior from birth might make you less likely to consider that your approach could be fundamentally wrong, Sarah replied. Unenhanced beings know we lack advantages, so we've learned to look for solutions that don't depend on having advantages. Enhanced beings know they possess advantages, so they naturally try to apply those advantages directly. The observation chamber fell completely silent as the full implications of Sarah's statement became clear. She wasn't just demonstrating that unenhanced beings could contribute to galactic civilization. She was suggesting that genetic enhancement, the foundation of consortium governance, might actually be counterproductive for certain types of problem-solving. Director Vexay deactivated the strategic displays, returning the chamber to its normal configuration. Candidate Chen, your evaluation is complete. Your performance will be analyzed by committees representing every major faction within consortium governance, and the results will influence policy decisions affecting the entire galaxy. As Sarah prepared to leave the evaluation chamber, Commander Zektor approached her with an expression of deep respect. Ms. Chen, regardless of what political conclusions are drawn from your performance, You have demonstrated capabilities that exceed those of our most enhanced strategists in several critical areas. The galaxy would benefit from individuals with your perspective serving in leadership positions. Sarah met his gaze steadily. Commander, I never wanted to lead anyone or change galactic governance. I just wanted to prove that capability matters more than genetics. If that proof has political implications, then perhaps those implications needed to be confronted eventually. Admiral Thoss joined them, his crystalline features reflecting patterns that conveyed formal recognition. Ms. Chen, your evaluation has provided evidence that will reshape our understanding of the relationship between genetic enhancement and practical capability. Whether that reshaping leads to reform or revolution depends on how the various factions choose to interpret your results. As Sarah walked through Academy Station's corridors for the final time, she passed groups of enhanced cadets whose conversation stopped when they saw her. Word of her evaluation performance had spread throughout the Academy, generating discussions about genetic hierarchy that had never occurred in 8,000 years of consortium history. In her quarters, preparing for transport back to human space, Sarah received a final communication from Dr. Vasquez. Her mentor's expression mixed pride with deep concern. Sarah, preliminary reports of your evaluation have reached the highest levels of consortium governance. 3 species have formally requested emergency sessions to address the implications of your performance. The political crisis you've precipitated will reshape galactic civilization one way or another. Sarah smiled, feeling strangely calm despite the magnitude of forces her actions had unleashed. Elena, I did exactly what I set out to do. I proved that an unenhanced human could contribute meaningfully to galactic military service. If that proof threatens the established order, then maybe the established order was never as stable as everyone believed. And what will you do now? Vasquez asked. Sarah looked out her viewport at the stars that held billions of beings whose lives would be affected by interpretations of her evaluation performance. She was still unenhanced, still genetically unremarkable by consortium standards, but she was no longer the person who had submitted that first application. She was something unprecedented. An unenhanced human who had forced the galaxy to question its fundamental assumptions about genetic hierarchy and superior capability. Whether that made her a catalyst for positive change or dangerous revolution remained to be seen. But Sarah Chen was no longer interested in being told what she couldn't achieve. She had proven that being born wrong might be exactly what the galaxy needed. I'm going home, Elena. And then I'm going to wait and see what the galaxy decides to do with the proof I've provided. Because regardless of their political conclusions, I've demonstrated that humans can succeed despite being told we're inadequate. Sarah Chen closed the communication and prepared for her journey home, carrying with her the knowledge that she had changed the galaxy simply by refusing to accept that genetics determined destiny. Whether that change would lead to a better future for unenhanced beings everywhere, or to the collapse of 8,000 years of galactic civilization, was no longer her decision to make. The galaxy would have to figure that out for itself.